Local Resident Producers Program. The content is the sole responsibility of the producer and does not necessarily reflect the views or policies of Oshkosh Community Access Television, the City of Oshkosh, the Oshkosh Cable Television Advisory Commission, or Time Warner Cable. Content is the sole responsibility of the producer and does not necessarily reflect the views or policies of Oshkosh Community Access Television, the City of Oshkosh, the Oshkosh Cable Television Advisory Commission, or Time Warner Cable.
I'm not looking at you. I'm not looking at his hand either. 10 seconds.
Hi, and welcome to Eye on Oshkosh. I'm your host, Cheryl Hentz, along with my co-host, former Oshkosh Mayor and City Councilwoman Melanie Bloechl. And we're joined today by Winnebago County Executive Jane Vandehei. We'll be discussing, among other things, the proposed 2003 budget for the county. Welcome, Jane. Thanks for being here.
Well, thank you very much for having me.
It's a pleasure to have you. Right out of the chute, you have been taking a beating in the newspaper lately. And we're going to be discussing the specifics of the budget, and that's kind of what you've been getting beat up for. But I want to give you an opportunity to respond to the Northwestern's claim that, quote, you're out of step with conventional political wisdom. And the reason that they say that is because you claimed that there weren't going to be any new taxes in the upcoming year, and now we're faced with an 8.2% tax levy increase. So here's your shot to get back at the Northwestern and say how you feel about that.
Well, and the fact is, I guess it's kind of hurtful to be misquoted, but it's just, I'm used to that now. It's been, just 10 years. I'm the one with the 29 cartoons and the little mocking stuff. So the only time it concerns me is when it is factually a problem. What we did at the beginning of the budget cycle was say to every department head, don't exceed last year's rate. Bring me a zero budget, but also bring me what programs will be cut if that's the case. Mm-hmm. And as we well know in the coverage of some of our public safety things, Sheriff's Department this year has a 17.5% increase. Mm-hmm. Now I could have said zero, except that means we would never occupy the $30 million building out here, and that would be a problem. There's also a large increase in the Human Service Department. Those aren't numbers that they can cut. Out-of-house placements this year are on a track, as we look at factual numbers, to be $1 million short in terms of foster care and correctional placements. So for me to bring in a zero increase in that department, you're right, I do feel a little out of step. It would be phony, it would be dishonest to bring in a zero number or inflate revenues and decrease expenditures only to have next year's budget not be able to meet the youth and the public safety and public health concerns. So I think I've been watching the governor's campaign, and I do feel a little out of step with that. They're both claiming that they'll never increase taxes ever, no matter what. They have a $2 billion shortfall. When you play those pranks and games and steal tobacco money, then in the big picture, you lose your Moody credit rating. Ours is one of the lowest in the country. And the lending institutions then don't hold you in any kind of esteem, which means your interest rates go up. Winnebago has a AA2 credit rating, $9 million in reserves. The Moody evaluations and lending institutions call our administration of finances exemplary and conservative and solid. As a matter of fact, we are one of the 5 lowest counties of the 72 in terms of expenditures. So clearly you can spin it any way you want. They're doing the commercials now where McCallum is claiming that Doyle will break the operational cap. We're 38 cents below the state operational cap. That isn't an accident. The cap was imposed in '93, and we're 38 cents below it.
Sure.
You know, so I suggest that you can make people fearful or make, you know, villains. What we're trying to do is deliver public service, public safety, public health. That's our whole responsibility. And like I said, the jail cost $1.10 on the rate. The increase is 10 cents, which means we eliminated many, many other things. We eliminated 30 positions, if you include landfill and such. People aren't doing traveling. There isn't frivolous spending. We did that on purpose because we knew that $1.10 on the rate for taxpayers was not possible. People are struggling. They're out of work. By the same token, county government, they call it the government of last resort. We're the government that is the one when you lose your job and you need to be retooled and you need unemployment benefits or you need food vouchers and you've been a man who's worked his whole life and never needed help and now needs food vouchers, or when your child is in terrible trouble at school or needs foster care. We're the ones you turn to. You know, we don't have PR guys, we don't have press releases, we're just the government of last resort for people here.
Do you think part of the problem, why the Northwestern, I mean, I think part of the problem is that you're a woman in a leadership position. I think they have an adverse reaction to women in positions of authority. Speaking as a woman who they've had a lot of problems with, I think there's probably only one woman in politics that they really haven't had a problem with, and that was Cheryl Roessler. Right. And if you stay vanilla enough, you know, that you don't seem to have a problem. What I'm wondering is do you think that one of the reasons that they may have taken you to task in this particular editorial is because you did come out early and state that you wanted to keep those tax rates flat, that you were going to do everything within your power not to see an increase, right, and that they viewed that as like a promise that was laid out and then somehow you didn't keep that promise?
They do seem to be trying to spin it that way, but factually, you know, all of the other media sources and radio and all of our memos and documentation have said, bring your rate in at zero, but give us what's lost because of that. You know, and even in malevolence, they weren't able to do a piece that said, you know, Jane promised, like George Bush, read my lips. Mm-hmm. You know, that was never the case. But you can spin things around if you want to, and that's kind of consistently what's happened. And you're right, there used to be 11 women on the county board. We're down to 3. Our chairman is just precious. He really is. But when I told him we were down to 3, that women aren't seeking public office, he said, how did we get 3? You know, there is not a sense. I'm a critical care nurse and an administrator, and the fact is, I had never experienced any sense of you know, unwelcome or any of those things until elected office, and I think that's true. I think there's a sense that it isn't a place where we should be.
Well, and just to follow up on that, and then I know Cheryl wants to follow up with another question. I find it very interesting that the county seems to bear a large burden when tax time rolls around to be the first one to literally get your brains pounded in. But as a city person who worked on budgets for 11 and a half years, very rarely do you see the city taking kicks in the behind like you have, and they saw a huge tax increase in the last couple of years. And yet the city does not receive those same kind of beatings that the county does, and I don't understand that because we're one and the same, and the same people are paying the same taxes. So, you know, I guess I just wanted to throw that out there as someone who's been...
In the bigger picture, though, it really is, and I'll die before I achieve it. In the bigger picture, Oshkosh is the county seat of Winnebago County. We have friends and loyalty to this community. In spite of the paper, we have people here that we care about and want to do well. When Oshkosh struggles and has 18 TIF districts and financial trouble, it not only is a problem for us on a professional level, but economically it's a real problem. Mm-hmm. And so what I've been doing all these years is to build that bridge between Kimberly, Clark, and Neenah tax base and Oshkosh, working with Oshkosh schools, Neenah schools. If we don't embrace being a whole county, soon we're going to continue to fall behind. You know, Appleton and Outagamie, their growth is 8 and 9%. It's burgeoning because you don't see this constant struggle between, well, you know, we can't like them, they're from the town, they're from a different part of the community. If that doesn't stop, it will harm us economically. But it's a real struggle. It's a real genuine, probably from the old days. But if we don't collaborate with projects, you know, like public health, we're looking at trying to pull public health together. That's just a very difficult issue. 10 years ago, and I know the Northwestern did an editorial that said I should just fix full public health together. 10 years ago, the cities bailed. You know, they used a loophole in the state taxes and said, we don't want to participate in county health anymore. You know, I wasn't here. It was a shame. Now we have satellite health departments all over. That's not an economy of scale, and that's not the best way to deliver service. But to bring those people back together after the acrimony is really, really hard. There's some optimism and some acceptance and some forgiveness it requires, and you can't spawn that in people if they don't feel it.
Jane, taking a look at the overall budget, kind of an overview of it, it's a levy summary is what the document is that you were kind enough to provide for us. And it shows that several departments within the county failed to meet your goal for the 2003 budget year. And those departments were child support, coroner, courts, human services, district attorney, facilities, health department, UW Fox Valley, and UW Extension. Now, I guess, you know, one question that I have, and I'm sure viewers have as well, is first of all, what exactly was your goal? Was it just one, or was it a number of different things? And why is it that these 8 or 9 departments failed to meet it?
What we did, the directive said 0. Each budget year, city does it too. The administrator, the leader of the ship, sends out a memo that says, as you prepare your budget document, don't exceed this. There are years it was 2%, 3% because of cost of living and such. But this year, knowing that we would have a huge burgeoning cost of public health, and public safety associated with crime, youth, and preparation for all kinds of you know, future concerns about health and immunizations and such. I said, bring it in at 0, but give me then the list of what things we can't do, so that the decision wasn't put on an individual department head. You know, I'm responsible for this whole operation. It is inherently unfair to say to, you know, to child support, quit aggressively seeking, you know, non-custodial parent money, right, because you need to be flat. And what I was hoping was someone that we could offset it, that, you know, highway and those departments are down by 40 and 50%. You know, and we were looking at ways to hope to have an offset. And I believe that we would have achieved that, even in spite of the 17% on the health insurance and the $1.10 on the jail. But the ringer, the thing that was so difficult to overcome, are the youth services. And like I said, it gets back to honesty. You know, we could make that a flat number for spending next year. We don't believe that's true. The projection of youth has increased tremendously. And I hate to be a harpy, but that's the department that we have such contention with the state over. It's a mandate to deliver youth services. The cost of it used to be borne by the state at 60% and the county by 30%, which is an unfair mandate, but that's how they were managing to do it. Right. Now I've got numbers from all 3 of our surrounding counties, and they've actually flipped that support. So now the county is picking up 68% of youth services, youth costs, foster care and such, but they've been freezing the youth aids for us to do that, so they're down to 32%. So we're picking up an additional, and it's just a classic example of an unfunded mandate. They keep saying, well, what are unfunded mandates? This is classic, and it is this year affecting our budget to the tune of $1 million.
We're going to talk about those mandates in just a few minutes, but you know, the departments that didn't meet your goal, what, if anything, have you put in place to ensure that they do meet your goals in the future?
What we've done, we have some significant strategies just to simply, you know, I don't want to sound like an average harpy, just to present the problem is useless. It just makes people frightened, and it is useless. So we have solutions. We're developing a wraparound program instead of using Lincoln Hills where there's a huge recidivism and such. We're implementing a program beginning of the year here locally that we think will be more cost effective and more effective in turning those youth placement numbers around. In addition to that, the sheriff tells me that the operational cost of the jail should decrease over time because of the direct supervision concept of that, meaning 65 criminals to 1 jailer. those have to contain operational costs, I suspect, hopefully to offset the debt service that's been achieved. One of the problems with the UW extension, it's another kind of a little sort of a tease. That's a department that's paid for and directed by the State Department of Agriculture. So they pick up 60% of the cost. So every time they give a raise or a fringe benefit or a increase, 40%'s on our nickel. So that, it isn't even a matter of, gee, I'd rather not spend the 40%. If they raise their 60, then we are encumbered with that,
right, sure.
regardless. Some of the elected folks, I have to say, as an editorial moment, Sue Ertmer, Diane Fremden, Mary Krieger, have been just effective in bringing their budgets down, consolidating positions, just a yeoman's job. But the fact is, elected people have their own discretion. And so, speaking of DA and coroner, certainly they have increases, and we've encouraged them.
Yeah, they do.
Yeah. And
pretty significant ones as well.
Exactly. And we've encouraged them to say, you're elected by citizens, as am I. I would think this would be a significant driving factor in your presenting yourself to the community, that you would lead and join us in the charge to keep things flat, and yet we have no legal authority to do that. I spent some time with both of them, and they said, well, we're elected, we can spend what we want.
And that's what I was just going to ask you. Once they propose a budget and they give their line items and they say, I'm going to spend X amount of dollars on vehicles, right, or X amount on this, that, or the other thing, there is nothing in place from your perspective as the county executive or the county board, right, that can rein them in and say, you said you were going to spend $100,000 on XYZ, yeah, and you've now taken XYZ dollars and spent them on something else. There's nothing that keeps them from moving those dollars or doing with them what they will.
Constitutional officers. They're
and that's
duly
dangerous.
Elected. You go there and vote, and there's no opponent, and you just vote, and after a while, it's just an open situation.
Well, sure, but then say you do have an example or a situation, for example, where one of these elected officials uses money that they previously had said they were going to use for piece A of the puzzle, and instead they use it for piece L or M of the puzzle. Then later on, when something critical comes up, right, they come back to the county board, right, and the various committees and say, folks, we need more money, and your hands are once again almost tied, because it's critical stuff, yeah, that's needed.
But we've been more aggressive, and you need to be careful in a political milieu. Clearly, a few years ago, we had one department head who just was convinced that if she didn't get more staff, their fingers would just fall off from the terrible hard work. I didn't agree. Personnel department did a study and said that isn't true. So we didn't replace the position, and I have to tell you, the political ramifications, I think the paper, again, I was about the meanest thing since ever came down the pike.
Sure.
Now, we aren't silent. What's wrong is still wrong, and we don't call black white. But, for example, in the elected budgets, the DA's budget, we haven't done a lot of changing because we'll have a new DA regardless.
Right.
And I'm hoping whoever takes that position, then who wins that position, will use good new evaluation skills to see why this would be such a huge increase over the years. Coroner came in with a $10,000 increase in deputy salaries. At a time when we're freezing and eliminating positions. So I simply wouldn't accept it. I simply, and you'll see he submitted it, and I in my budget simply eliminated the 10 grand, which is what I need to have the courage to do. But he'll go back to his committee and to the board and say, boy, I'm working so hard. And ultimately,
they can give it to him.
They can. I don't think they will. But ultimately, the department head for elected people are citizens. And until they say, what are you doing with our money?
Right. And
then they feel pretty brave.
And that's why it's so important for people. I think that they look at these voluminous documents, right, and they say, you have to be a brain surgeon to get through some of this paperwork and look at some of these numbers. I want to commend you and your staff on what a really wonderful job that you do putting out this budget document. After looking at them for 11 and a half years, it is very easy to go through. It is very easy to read and very easy to understand. And to be able to put out this volume with this much detail and make it as simplistic and understandable is really a monumental task. So, first and foremost, I want to thank you and your staff for working that hard, because I know what goes into these.
It's 479 pages.
Well, and so as not to frighten people off from taking a look at it, because it is so well laid out, it's very self-explanatory. I mean, it's laid out as to who the department heads are and who, how much staff, and comparisons to previous years, and it really is very good. One of the things you had talked about early on is unfunded mandates, which, you and I, both being in politics, we'll probably talk about till the day we die. Mm-hmm. Greg Underheim the other night at the debates with Mr. Genesio talked about in this budget that there is actually a piece of the budget that talks about mandate relief. Now, I spoke with actually, I left a message for Richard Wolink, the city manager, today. He called me back and said he knew nothing of any kind of mandate relief in this budget. No one has communicated this mandate relief with him. I spoke with the mayor of Menasha. He says it's non-existent.
Right.
Are you aware of any mandate relief?
Well, I am. It's a prank. What I did, we really spend a lot of time researching databases, comparing notes with surrounding municipalities. We have a large consortium in the area with Brown and Outagamie, so we keep abreast of things. And there's a website called the Wheeler Report. Mm-hmm. And the Wheeler Report has, you could submit things to it. And I think last week or week before, and we'd gotten some calls, Governor McCallum had issued a press release that was on the Wheeler Report that said, by the end of this year, by December, there would be mandate relief. That he would accomplish that, and all the communities and us and such should just submit what we wanted as mandate relief, and then he would achieve that by the end of this year. Well, many of them are based in statute. They aren't in session, and one or two of the counties sent a whole list, back to the courts, back to youth aids and such. Most of the counties just said, you're not in session. It's a dandy press release, looks nice,
but it's all fluff.
There's no substance to that.
So there's really, in the budget, there is actually no verbiage that states that in the upcoming budgetary session there will be any relief from unfunded mandates, such as MEAT-ARB, stormwater management, ADA, recycling. So any of these big ticket items that cities and counties look at that are huge.
Courts bother us a lot.
None of that. That is not for real. So Mr. Underheim basically floated a balloon. It sounded good during a debate. No substance.
Well, did he not even say we recently passed it, or we just passed it? Weren't those his words?
No, you can't pass anything without the Senate, and of course poor Senator Koala's in a little trouble.
What he said.
I'm sorry, that doesn't sound reasonable. They're not in session and haven't been. But back to the early in the campaign process, we heard balloons floated saying that Governor McCallum had hoped, instead of taking all the revenue sharing immediately, that what he would do is take a portion of it, but he would segregate $40 million or $40 million, and he would set that aside and create a new group, kind of like Kettle revisited and revisited and revisited. Set this group aside, and then municipalities like us could simply apply to this group and say, look, we've done all these projects together, so we should be rewarded, and so the portion of revenue sharing then would go to the communities that demonstrated cooperation.
Not happening.
Well, the problem with that is, in our counties, we've already consolidated recycling and landfill and 911 and FoxNet. Now we can still do probably public health if I can get the hard feelings restored from the last go-around with public health. But all of those projects were already done, and it doesn't reimburse retroactively. So
could you, because this is something that was actually suggested because of this talk of mandate relief, all of the hard work that you've done for the terms that you have been there,
doesn't count.
It doesn't count. But if you have agreements, contractual agreements, can you not simply dissolve them and reactivate them in 2004 before
We
and
could.
then get
We
credit?
could do that. The problem is...
But see, this is what I'm saying. This is what the
Yeah,
state is
we could.
encouraging,
Yep.
is this fiddle-faddling around with dollars instead of really being honest.
And that's where when the paper said they're right, we're out of step. We aren't doing that. You know, we're not going to snatch the tobacco money and pretend it isn't gone.
Right.
We're not
Right.
going to, you know, because,
Right.
because like I said, we're the government of last resort, which means that right here at the local level, you know, we're not far enough away. We're not in Madison. So what we do right here actually hurts people
Yeah.
or helps them. And so we can, you know, we can be out of step with, you know, I'm not doing little campaigns that say, you know, the other guy's a rat. I guess I'm kind of proud of being out of step with that campaign. It looks to me like it's just a horrible thing. They're criticizing each other, and then when the moderators and the astute show say, so where are you going to get the $2 billion?
They all look at each other and say, what are you talking
Well,
about?
what's he doing? What's the other one going to do? He's trying to find it either. Well, what kind of public policy is that?
Right.
It isn't public policy in my mind.
Jane, we've only got like 3 minutes left. I can't believe how fast this time goes.
Kind of
But the surge in health insurance costs is one of the, you know, problems why the budget is the way it is and
Right.
why costs have increased so much. What portion of health insurance premiums do county employees actually pay?
Well, what we did, we have 7 represented groups. When I first took office, I think County was picking up 105, and we've been negotiating with the represented groups to pick up a larger portion. And that's a little more of a struggle because of the quid pro quo and legal. But the administrative staff have been just wonderful, just really understanding the problems. And so when we started having them pick up more, 2 years ago they picked up, from 100%, they picked up 4%. This October, they're picking up 6%. Next October, they're picking up 10%. So they've actually been making trade backs and trying to help us offset those costs.
So by 1 year from now, then, employees will pay 10%?
10%.
Okay.
Right.
And right now, what percent?
6.
6, okay.
And represented groups, we're hoping, we're entering into a consortium with business and other governments. We're looking at creating a consortium for a really large pool, kind of following a prototype that Fond du Lac County is doing. So we're hoping that we can do some quid pro quo in the labor negotiations.
When you
hopefully.
say 6 to 10% of the premium that they're picking up, what kind of dollars does that represent? I mean, is that $50 a week? Is that $100?
It depends on the program too. We have 3 different programs, and what we've been finding is more youthful people are choosing to sign up with rates that are lower, that they're not worried about their health care concerns as much. So it really is across the board.
Okay.
It varies.
Okay. We've got 1 minute left. In that 1
Now,
minute,
how can that be?
in that 1 minute, what message do you want to convey to the people in Winnebago County?
I think, 1 minute quickly, I think the biggest thing that I'm concerned about today and for a while is the thing with youth. We have a situation in the country that's frightening to people. Wars and rumors of war, the economy and worries of economy. And I think regardless of where you are in the county, north, south, west, town, village, I think we need, please, spend time. We need more foster parents. We need support to the children. They're getting in trouble now, and I think suicide rates in this city are 3 times higher than the national average. I think we need to nurture our children right away.
Okay.
Wonderful.
Wonderful. Thanks very much for being here. It's
you, too.
always a pleasure to see you, and this is the first time we've had you on the show, of course, but
It
we
was
hope you'll come
very
back.
nice.
So,
Very nice.
And thank you very much for joining us today. We hope you'll join us again next time. On our next show, Melanie and I will do something a little different. Rather than have a guest, we will give you our take on the local political races where the election will be held on Tuesday, November 5th. Thanks for joining us. We hope to see you again next time. Keep your eye here on us, because we've got our eye on Oshkosh. Take care.
Well, I don't know if people are going to be ready for our